I was standing in my garage at 2 in the morning watching my backup generator cough and settle into that steady, comforting hum. When it hit me, moving to Riverside Meadows had been the best idea I'd ever had, and also possibly the worst decision of my life. A thunderstorm the night before had knocked the whole neighborhood dark, and while everyone else sat in candles and curse words, my servers in the basement kept blinking like little stubborn stars. I thought, okay, at least something in this house works the way it's supposed to. My name's Quincy Graham. I run a small data recovery business out of my basement, the kind of thing where one power surge can turn someone's life into a handful of meaningless files and a mountain of regret. I'd installed that generator 6 months after we moved in because I couldn't afford to lose a client's medical records or court documents to a blackout. The unit was legal, installed by a pro, grounded like a belt, and suspenders the whole 9 yards. I took pride in it, quiet pride, the small business equivalent of a dad showing up with a sensible truck. And then the yellow envelopes started appearing. They'll make you feel stupid at first, like you misread the rules, like there's some nuance you missed. The first one told me I'd been fined $500 for excessive noise pollution between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. because I'd run the generator during a storm. Section 14.7, the letter said, nice and official, and signed by the HOA president, Patricia Vandermeer. You get 2 interactions with most HOAs, the welcome packet that reads like a small law library, and the one where they tell you your trash cans must be out of sight by 6 a.m. on non-collection days. I had both. I appealed. I hand-delivered documentation, decibel readings, local ordinances, the whole boring bundle of proof. They denied it. Then I got a second fine, $750 for a second outage. Then a $1,000 fine after a worse storm. Each envelope felt like a little stone in my mailbox. At a certain point, it stops being about the money and starts being about the principal who gets to decide what's reasonable in your home. So I did what reasonable men do when pushed into unreasonable corners. I tried to be reasonable. I made an appointment. I sat across from Patricia in an office that smelled faintly of lemon oil and self-importance, and she smiled like she might hand me a casserole and take my house instead. When you bought in, you agreed to the covenants, she said. Those covenants protect property values. She suggested I rent office space, buy expensive battery systems, all perfectly legal ways of saying we don't care that you run a business here. That's when things shifted from annoyance to the cold, methodical kind of anger that wants a plan instead of a punch. I started paying attention to Patricia. Not stalkery, practical neighborhood watch level attention. I learned she lived in the largest house in Riverside Meadows on the low end of Meadowbrook Lane, and that her basement had a sump pump that ran hard every spring. I learned neighbors took fines for flowers, for mailbox numbers, for horizontal stripes on lawns. I learned the HOA liked its quiet and its power. And then came the weather. The spring that felt like it would never stop raining. Forecasts turned from possible isolated showers to the kind of warnings meteorologists use to explain words like historic. Power flickered and then went. I stood in the dark a few times and did the math run, the generator get fined. Don't run it, maybe lose $20,000 in client work or worse, wreck someone's life because of corrupted medical records. Once in the middle of that week, I chose to let the outage run its course. I'm not proud of that decision. I told myself 1,000 moral things about fairness and patience and community, but the truth was cruder. I wanted to see whether the rules were, say, equally applied. I walked past Patricia's house during the outage and watched the street. Her sump pump discharge pipe lay quiet, the gutter dry as a joke. I went home, started the generator at 6 a.m., precisely when the covenant's noise restriction lifted, and checked my systems. They were fine. A day later, restoration trucks were at Patricia's house. Her basement had flooded. She posted about devastating infrastructure failures and asked for community support. The board proposed a $200,000 drainage fix split among homeowners, $2,500 per household. That assessment landed on my porch like a grenade. I'd already paid over $2,000 in fines for doing what any sensible person might do in an outage. Now the HOA wanted me to chip in to prevent a problem that had just ruined the house of the woman who'd fined me for trying to protect my business. You can hear the twist coming, can't you? But twists in life are rarely neat. This one arrived as paperwork. I found a clause allowing reasonable accommodation for business needs buried in the covenant, submitted the application, denied, of course. And then when I dug deeper for the election petition, a neighbor told me something else. Patricia's basement had flooded before. Her lot had known drainage problems. She'd been warned when she bought it. She'd installed a sump pump and expected the neighborhood to absorb the consequences. That's when the fight stopped, being only about my generator and became something broader. I started a petition for a special election 20% of homeowners needed to sign. I knocked doors, explained the fines and the special assessment, and the feeling that the HOA had become a machine for petty tyranny and occasionally for padding pockets. I collected signatures. I filed the petition. 2 weeks later, I got a certified letter the HOA's attorney was suing me for breach of covenant, seeking an injunction, attorney fees, and more than $15,000. Retaliation is a mean word. When you're on the receiving end, it feels like a splinter under the skin. I called a lawyer, found one who knew HOA law, and we began to prepare a response. The middle act of any good story needs a turning point and a supporting cast, and mine arrived in the form of neighbors who were done being nickel and dimed. George, who lived 2 doors down and whose sump pump sang like an electric lawnmower in spring. Helen, who was on a fixed income and didn't have $2,500 lying around. Margaret, the retired teacher who agreed to be our secretary. They showed up. We held community meetings, put facts on slides, and demonstrated where HOA money had gone. The numbers were ugly stipends, landscaping bills paid to private lawns, legal fees. Patterns became outlines. Outlines became accusations. Accusations became records we handed to the authorities. Election day came and the ballots flipped the board. We won. Me, George, Helen, Margaret, strangers turned allies, replaced the people who'd been weaponizing the covenants. The first thing we did was rescind the assessment pending review and stop the harassment. Then we examined the books. What we found was worse than we'd hoped: undisclosed stipends, HOA funds, used to improve the president's property payments that didn't match invoices. $80,000, give or take, quietly rerouted to a few pockets. The police and the state attorney's office took an interest. People who thought HOA headaches were trivial suddenly saw a bigger picture. Power without oversight becomes theft. The satisfying part, the cathartic popcorn moment outcome you hope for when you stick your neck out, came in court. The jury didn't take long. Patricia and 3 board members were found guilty of embezzlement and sentenced. Patricia got 2 years plus restitution. We used recovered funds to do the real drainage work, targeted, sensible, and a fraction of the original price tag. We revised the generator rules to allow emergency use with reasonable limits, abolished undisclosed stipends, and published the HOA books online. Was it messy? Yes. Was it expensive? Absolutely. Did it cost me more than the fines and lawyer fees and pitch meetings and nights of stress? Of course it did. But when the repairs cost $35,000 instead of $200, when families who couldn't afford to move were spared a crippling assessment, when the neighborhood picnic had 60 neighbors laughing in the park instead of 5 people whispering about a tyrant at the edge of the subdivision, that was worth it. In the quiet, after the part of the story where life goes on and you realize what changed was not fireworks, but the removal of constant small fires, I learned something hard and practical. Rules on paper mean nothing without fairness and accountability. A covenant that refuses to account for emergencies or allows leaders to line their pockets is not protection. It's a tool. And the people who get hurt are the ones who can't afford a lawyer or who assume silence is safer than standing up. I'm not proud of every choice I made. I'm not proud of the night I chose not to start my generator and watched a basement flood that felt petty, and maybe it was. But sometimes systems are only revealed by their cracks, and sometimes a flooded basement leads to the uncovering of a much bigger rot. I'd like to say I only acted out of principle. The truth is murkier. I acted out of principle, anger, and a stubborn belief that the rules should apply evenly. Today, Riverside Meadows is quieter in the good way. The generator sits in my garage for storms and for emergencies, humming when it has to, and otherwise forgotten. We have new policies, transparent finances, and a community that actually talks to one another, sometimes about the weather, sometimes about soccer practice, usually about nothing heavy. I served as HOA president for a couple years to help steady the ship, then stepped aside. The new family in Patricia's old house installed a backup generator of their own life, has a sense of irony like that, and their kids play in the yard without having to cross a line of suspicion. So here's the thing I want you to take with you quietly. The way you tuck a penny into a shoe for luck authority without accountability is dangerous, and small acts of resistance, petitions, phone calls showing up can be the backup systems a community needs. It's not glamorous. It's paperwork and late nights and convincing your neighbors to care. But it works. Now I want to ask you, where do you draw the line between enforcing rules and enforcing control? When does community protection become tyranny in practice? And who gets to decide? Share a story, if you've got one. I want to hear about the time you stood up or didn't, and what came of it. If this resonates, share it, comment below, or tell your own HOA horror or victory story. Let's figure out together how ordinary people fix ordinary problems one petition at a time.
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video.